What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. As you can see from the title of this video, Tennessee governor signs bill making protesters felons. Slightly misleading, but this is a really big issue because in the state of Tennessee, felons actually lose the right to vote. So this is the type of thing that could impact, I won't necessarily say this election per se, but we're definitely in a dangerous territory where it looks like they're using the law to basically take away people's right to vote, which obviously impacts everything. So I'm just going to introduce you guys to this story. Quick synopsis, got a little video, and then we got a little commentary shortly after that. So let me pull this up for you guys. Okay, let's bring this in here. So Tennessee Governor Bill Lee quietly signed a bill into law ramping up punishments for certain kinds of protests, including losing rights, including losing the right to vote. A GOP-controlled General Assembly passed the measure last week during a 3-day special legislative session and was signed without an announcement earlier this week. Among other things, the new law stipulates that people who illegally camp on state property will face a Class E felony, punishable by up to 6 years in prison. People found guilty of a felony in Tennessee lose the right to vote. So that's the big overarching theme here. That's a big problem. I feel like this is a First Amendment violation here. Basically, there have been continued protests, obviously, around the country, but I guess specifically in Tennessee, what's been happening is protesters have been kind of chaining themselves to the steps of the state house. That's been a problem. I guess they've also kind of blocked emergency vehicles. So I actually went and pulled up the bill. I believe it's 8005, and most of it is just kind of restructuring the different classes of all of the acts related to a riot. You know, if you are somebody who is engaged in rioting, it changes what your jail time could be punishable between, you know, it goes from 6 months to say 12 months or something like that. So it's a lot of that. It's also changing your liability for damages that occur to government property. But the big thing, you know, all things that I think are legitimate and fair, but at the same time, these are things that are directly created to kind of quell this whole protest. And that's not what this country is supposed to be about. We shouldn't be fighting the protesters by changing the laws so that we can just do what the law says. We should be actually addressing the concerns of the people who are protesting, or just let them peacefully assemble and leave it at that. For the most part, I didn't see too many big instances of violence that were related to this. But I have a brief video I want to show you guys. This is the back and forth when this special session actually occurred.
We are using a bazooka to go after a housefly here.
We seem to not worry about protesting when we as white people show up to our capitals with AR-15s. But when black people show up with signs, it just seems like all of a sudden we want to pass legislation to stop protesting. And so that's just a little concerning to me. And maybe that's why the protesters are out there in the first place.
You can stand with criminals, or you can stand with the rest of us that are in favor of the rule of law and in favor of law enforcement.
I want to stop it right there. So that's my issue with this whole thing. When you say things like you can stand with criminals, well, when you change the law, you kind of take people who weren't originally criminals and you create them. You make them criminals. You create a situation where they become felons unnecessarily because you're changing the situation which they find themselves in. I mean, I guess you'd say that's not fair. I mean, God forbid we do things that are fair. We actually let people peacefully assemble. This issue with camping, this is not worth changing a law over. You know what I mean? I understand if you want to make people more liable for damages. I'm fine with that. I understand if you want to change the jail sentences. I'm not really okay with it, but you know, that's a thing, and I'll fight you on that. But making people felons for camping? Come on, man. I think the one gentleman described it as using a bazooka to kill a housefly. That's about accurate, because that's what we're talking about. punishing people for sleeping on the steps and having camping gear out at a government building by putting them in jail for up to 6 years? That's who we're going to punish? By the way, really hard to get justice in this country if something happens to you at the hands of police. By the way, just crazy thing across the board, all races. If you have a run-in with the police, it might be difficult for you to get justice, but you camp outside of one of these buildings, they're gonna get you.
Are we so scared that we can't let, 50 kids put up a tent?
Again, my concern is the peaceful protesters. And at this point, you can't assure me and or this committee that under a constitutional, protected, peaceful protesters, you can't assure me that unintentionally, intentionally, by mistake or out of convenience, that peaceful protesters will not be arrested, charged, convicted with a felony, serve their time, released with that felony. You can't assure us that peaceful protesters would not be subject to this, could you?
So the words on the screen, if you're not watching, this is going to change it to a mandatory 30-day jail sentence, and the misdemeanor.
Okay, we have a
With the misdemeanor of touching a police officer. So this is that whole stop resisting, where you can kind of take a situation as an officer and you can make it fit whatever you're trying to accomplish. If you want to stop a protest, if you're trying to stop people from gathering, then you just kind of put them in a situation where they don't feel comfortable gathering. Now, to be fair, I tried to find instances where things had really gotten out of hand, and it looks like things really haven't much. It seems like it's been pretty peaceful for the most part, but this whole measure really is just to stop this presence. They don't want this look. This is not a good look for them. So in line with the president and his whole, we need to crack down on protesters, this is what the Tennessee governor has decided to do. And interestingly, he doesn't have to sign this. He could just wait 10 days and it becomes a law, but he chose to put his name on this. So if you live in Tennessee, you make sure you take note.
Page bill. And the simple question I ask you is, could you show an example of some injury that's happened on the Capitol grounds that you're responding to? Is there an actual event based in reality that has given rise to this bill, something that has occurred around here in the state of Tennessee? And if so, what is it?
Says here, Lamberth was unable to give an example of an injury sustained by officers on Tennessee Capitol grounds. Again, I tried myself to find a story that really provoked such a harsh response, and I could not find much. Like I said, I agree with them ramping up the charges for people who are charged with or not the charges, but the penalty for people who are charged with vandalizing property. That's fine. You're vandalizing. If you're rioting, so be it. But gathering on the Capitol grounds and sleeping there, it's a felony.
The people of Tennessee are watching. You can support our law enforcement officers, or you can spit in their face by voting against this bill just like others have.
Now think about that. This is, again, why is this anti-police? This has nothing to do with the police. Protesting is a constitutional right. Like you have the right to peacefully assemble. What does that have to do with the police? What does camping have to do with the police? What does sleeping on the Capitol grounds have to do with the police? Except for when you create a situation where they have to come out and remove people unnecessarily. I don't think that's not what I want police doing. I want police stopping real crime. I want police protecting people, not harassing people who are laying down on the ground. This is absurd.
but for you and others to indicate and insinuate that I don't like them, don't support them, I want people spitting in their face, I'm not trying to protect them, is a lie.
So this just goes on to say that this has officially passed. And like I said, the governor did not have to sign this. He could have waited 10 days. It would have become law, and that could have been his stance. Like, you know what? I'm going to let this become law. I don't necessarily agree with this, but not because of any reason other than, I guess, his, I don't know, his relationship to the president. But I would think that that's where this is coming from. It's coming from the top. And that's the problem with the president. You know what I mean? You foster this environment. You don't step in and say, you know, things don't have to be this way. You allow it to be this volatile situation rather than trying to bring people together. You're looking at trying to divide them at all costs. And that's the problem what I see with this current president. Despite the economic developments or whatever boom you can suggest or whatever jobs you've created, which is arguable, when you create this environment, it doesn't matter what the economic implications of things are. We go back to, this is about human value. If people aren't valued equally, or if they're not valued at all in society, then you create a situation where people feel like they should be desperate. They should have to do something. They should have to stand up against the government because the government's not looking out for them. So all I'm asking is for them to be reasonable. I pulled up the actual bill. Like I said, I'm just going to give you the big things. Like I said, most of it is changing the classes of felony from like a B to an A and things like that, just moving around what the jail time implications are, and then also making it where the fines related to some of these charges have kind of increased. And also, if you are someone who is engaged in rioting, you are going to face a higher amount of like restitution you might have to pay. But Measure 13, which is specifically related to this camping thing, is what I'm going to read to you guys right now, which is the Equal Access to Public Property Act of 2012 makes it a Class A misdemeanor for a person to camp or on state property that is not specifically designated as a camping area. Present law provides various examples of what constitutes camping. This bill specifies that camping occurs between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. and revises and expands the example of what constitutes camping. This bill adds that in order to commit an offense, a person must have received an official warning not to engage in camping on state property and either continue to camp on state property or return within 24 hours of the warning to continue to engage in camping. Under present law, items used to illegally camp on state property are subject to seizure and forfeiture. This bill instead establishes a process by which any items used to illegally camp on state property may be taken into state custody, disposed of, provided notice of the seizure of the seizing agency's contact information is posted on the scene. The property is held for 90 days, for which the owner may reclaim the property and payment of reasonable storage fees. You got to pay for storage. I missed that the first time. And the property is not needed for evidence in a criminal proceeding. The bill provides immunity from liability to state government agencies and their agents who are involved in seizing property that is used to illegally camp on state property. This bill increases the punishment for illegal camping on state property from a Class A misdemeanor, which I believe is punishable by up to like 11 months or so. Don't quote me on that. 11 months of jail time, and that would have been a misdemeanor, to a Class E felony, which of course makes this person eligible to have their voting rights stripped. So that's the issue. That is what I have a problem with. This is something that, you know, again, we're just out, whatever the gentleman's name was, you know, you are killing a bazooka with a, or we're using a bazooka to kill a housefly. That's a problem. This is tyranny. This is not what your government's supposed to be doing to people who are following the law. And I understand you don't want people laying on the grounds of the Capitol, but, you know, honestly, who cares? You know what I mean? Who cares? This is not that big of a deal. This is not a felony. This is not something that we should be punishing with up to 6 years in jail. For what? For what? Like, tell me how would this, what does this have to do with the police? Why is this a police matter? Why is this a punishable by jail time matter? Like, 6 years of prison? Come on, man. Unreasonable. I'm okay with them changing the class of it. You know, I mean, okay. Actually, I'm not okay with any of this. This is in direct response to people actually protesting. This isn't something that just came up just randomly. People were protesting. They have been for a sustained period of time, And because the people who go to the Capitol, your state officials, didn't like that, because the president is failing us regarding his leadership, this is the response. Let's end this. Let's stop this. Not the rioting is out of control. No. We don't want people peacefully gathering. So let's make a situation where they feel like they have no choice. Let's crush them. This is not the America that I want to be a part of. I think there are better ways to handle these things. They could enact a curfew. They could, fine, they changed the class of it, but not making this a felony. That's absolutely unreasonable. And again, the governor did not have to sign this, but he wanted to make sure that people knew where he stood by signing it. This would have become law either way, but he wanted to make sure you knew that he had everything to do with it. So that's what's going on in Tennessee. Again, injustice is happening all over this country, and don't let them use this pandemic. Don't let the president create an environment where government officials feel comfortable doing this kind of thing, because this is how it starts. First it's Tennessee, and then it's Alabama, and then it's Mississippi, and then it's Ohio, and then it's Texas, and then it's California. So if this is wrong, it's wrong. Hopefully this gets overturned at the federal level, as it should be. And as I wrap this up, I just wanted to remind you guys, my primary focus here is not to be a YouTube commentator. It's not just to bring you guys news and information. I am somebody who wants to be actually engaged in the things that go on the ground. And when I stopped making videos a while ago, I told you guys I was focusing on criminal justice reform here in Oklahoma. Things got shut down, so I was not able to really go out and be active the way I would like. But as things are opening back up, I am resuming that work. Actually, today I'm going to be heading out to a rally where we're working on, well, I won't say we. I'm not really in charge of anything. I'm just going to be attending. I'm going to be reporting. I'm going to be helping to amplify the voices of the people who are trying to adjust the sentencing. We're trying to get some sentence reform in Oklahoma. They're trying to get sentence reform in Oklahoma, and I'm just going to be trying to shed a light on that. That work will continue, and I have expanded to human trafficking. It's another big issue here in Oklahoma, so I figured I can take part in events related around that, as well as the eradication of poverty through programs like UBI. So that is where I'm going to leave this. I would love to hear what you guys think about this. And if you didn't know, now you know, and make sure you pass the word along if you are or know someone in the area of Tennessee. And when it's time to reelect this guy, make sure that doesn't happen. So if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in